Hey there folks, this is Father Dougal 9000 here, and welcome to another episode of Dougal's Game Finish Chronicles, a series where I talk about the games I've played and beaten as part of the Hardcore Gaming 101 Forums Game Finish Challenge. I suppose I can start today's video by talking about how most of the games I'm going to be discussing for a while from here on out will be independently made games, either Flash titles or homebrew or whatever. I got rather frustrated with playing games that went on for hours and hours and hours, and ended up running in the opposite direction with games that I could beat in a single sitting. And I mean 20 to 30 minutes single sitting, not 8 hour single sitting which some folks with amazing body and bowel control can manage. So these will be weird and obscure as heck, but that's the fun of a show like this. All games are equal. Equally cool, equally interesting, equally talked about for a few minutes. Today's games were originally logged from the 13th to the 20th of April 2021. Anguna, Warriors of Virtue, for the Nintendo DS. This is a pretty decent Zelda-like, developed by Nathan Tolbert under his faux professional handle of Bite the Chili Productions. It was originally made for the Game Boy Advance back in 2008, but was ported to the DS shortly after. And I chose to play the DS version because it was easier to get running on my 3DS at the time. Anguna plays very much like any basic Zelda-style game, with a focus on navigating dungeons, solving simple puzzles, fighting enemies, and acquiring new items that either make you stronger or let you access new areas. There's plenty of game, with a large enough overworld and 5 dungeons, as well as a 6th bonus dungeon that I couldn't find, but it's not too imposing. It only took me about nearly 2.5 hours to beat the game. It's mostly quite alright. Although there's one thing I don't particularly like. And that is that there's a weird emphasis on hiding important rooms and dungeons behind secret walls that I think gets brought up in one brief text box somewhere. But there's no indication of their existence through visuals or the like. So if you're stuck, you have to rub up against every possible wall until you suddenly clip through into the next room. I had to have a map guide on hand after a while because of this, which is rather unfortunate. Also, the game will sometimes not give you the key you need to access the next room. For the second dungeon, you have to find it in a secret cave in the overworld, and in the 4th dungeon, you have 2 spare keys that you can accidentally use on 2 optional doors leading into the same room, and if you do that, you'll need to wait around until a 3rd spare key spawns in. That's unfortunate. But hey, if it takes your interest, it's free to download from Tolbert's website, along with other homebrew games he's made, including an Anguna sequel made for the goddamn Atari 2600. That's amazing. Life's amazing, honestly. Super Boss Gaiden for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Sort of. This is a very, very cool action platformer made by Dieter Laster and Chrono Mogul. The premise of this game is based on the unreleased Super Nintendo PlayStation add-on, an actual thing that Sony was gonna make for the Super Nintendo until Nintendo broke it off, which then led to the creation of the actual original PlayStation. The premise is that the last remaining prototype of this thing has fallen into the public's hands, and the president of Sony is furious. In fact, he's so furious that he decides to punch the entire company and everyone in the building into the ground. Seriously. It's a simple game with a focus on combat via the usual punch combos, aerial attacks, uppercuts, throwing objects, and slide attacks where you have to maintain your heart rate by repeatedly punching things. In spite of the silly premise and the main character sprite being obviously modeled on the Kunio-kun games, I'm amazed at how solid this thing is in terms of controls, graphics, and music. everything just works really well. And despite an annoying third phase and the second boss fight, I was enjoying my time on the game immensely. The game is really short, it only took about 17 minutes for me to get to the end, but if this were expanded into a much larger game, I'd happily be playing it for hours, but hey, for what it is, it's quite great. And the best thing about it, is that it was mainly designed to be played on the actual Super Nintendo PlayStation add-on prototype that fell into the public's hands. Yes, this is based on real-life events. The download comes with a version you can play on the Super Nintendo, so anyone can still enjoy the game regardless of its platform, but God above, that is so damn cool, and I'd happily recommend giving it a go. There is a link in the good old description. Hell yeah. How to Raise a Dragon for the browser. This is a short game by Gregory Avery Ware, in which you play as a dragon throughout their entire life, from birth to finding a home over 1,000 years later, played out as a series of vignettes where you can make certain choices as to what kind of dragon they'll be, what color they are, the elements they use, and what their relationship towards humans will be. There's plenty of options on offer, allowing a good incentive to keep replaying it to see what else you can find. There isn't a lot, but it's a pretty cool game from the old Flash days, and unlike some of the others where you might need to find a website that'll run a Flash emulator, which, considering I wrote this thing 2 years ago, may be quite automatic at this point, there is at the very least a downloadable executable from the itch.io page of the Future Proof Game studio that Avery Ware co-founded, so that's pretty neat. Just a tiny, cute, interesting little game with a lot of choice for what it is. Hell yeah. And with that, look at that. We've wrapped up another episode of the series. I hope that you enjoyed watching, and that you'll tune in for the next video, which might be a bit unusual. Might. Thank you so much, and until we meet again, have a wonderful day.